Do less and make more money. How crazy does that sound? I'm going to share with you how I think and how Warren Buffett thinks you can make more money by making less decisions. You can make more money by doing less work. Welcome to this week's edition of Money Matters, because as you know, I truly believe that money does matter, not for its own sake, but for the choices it gives. Warren Buffett gave us these great 7 rules for wealth. I have interpreted them for property, specifically for property. Okay, rule 1. Warren Buffett says, and this is fantastic advice, do not hold a stock for 10 minutes unless you're willing to hold it for 10 years. So Warren Buffett years ago bought some Coca-Cola shares, and he's held those Coca-Cola shares for decades. And because he believes in the fundamentals of Coca-Cola, what he says specifically is you should buy a share and you shouldn't be worried if the stock markets then shut for the next 10 years, because it's a fundamentally strong investment. And he's holding everything he buys for long term because he believes in it. So how can we adapt that? Well, this one's pretty easy. Don't buy a property for 10 minutes that you wouldn't be prepared to hold for 10 years. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? So if you've got the right property in the right place with the right kind of income and it's got the right kind of loan on it, you're buying property for the long term. The average price of a house in 1971 in the United Kingdom was just £5,000. Roll that forward to 2024. The average price of the house in the UK is now £300,000. But would you really care if you'd spent 20% too much in 1970 on buying a house and refurbishing it? So say you ended up paying £6,000 instead of £5,000. 50 years later, do you care? No. And that's exactly what Warren Buffett is saying. Don't stress about it. The most important thing with property, as Warren Buffett agrees with stocks and shares, is you've got to buy some. And there's always a reason why you shouldn't do it. Inflation, interest rates, somebody's invaded somebody else, Brexit, whatever. There's always a reason. The important thing is that you do it. Rule number 2 is this: don't lose money. He's talking about a number of different things here. It's very often the case with Warren. What he says is simple. What he means is complex. You could buy a share, I don't know, Apple, IBM, whatever. And you buy it for, I'll make it up, $10 a share. And then next Tuesday, it drops to $5 a share. What do most people do at that point? They panic. Oh my God, the shares are going down. We better sell them quick. No, you don't lose money if you don't sell. So if Apple or IBM or whatever is paying you a dividend, is paying you an income, why do you care what the value is unless you sell it? You need to interpret it for property. What you need to make sure is that you get a good yield. So your rent is good and strong compared to your mortgage and your other costs. Next week, we're buying a property for £500,000 in Manchester. And the rent on that is going to be about £3,500 a month. So £3,500 times 10 is 35, times 12 is 42. Okay, so it's 42,000 a year. And the value of it is £500,000, so roughly just over 8%. So take the rent times by 12, divided by the capital value, happy days, 8%. And anything better than 7% is generally a good investment from a property investment point of view. I'm not talking about capital appreciation. The most important concept is stress test. What we're really doing is we're stress testing the rent versus the mortgage, and we're working out how expensive does the mortgage need to get before you break even. Never ever panic, because if you sell the property at the wrong time, you can lose money, can't you? Because if property prices did go down 5 or 10%, and you bought it for 400 and you sold it for 350, you just lost money. If on the other hand, you don't need to sell it because you're still making money, well, hold it. 10 years, 20 years time, it's going to be worth way more than you paid for. Rule number 2, I've probably said it enough now, don't lose money. Rule number 3, fancy words, always buy below intrinsic value. What does that actually mean, Paul? It means buy it for less than it's worth. That's not difficult to understand, is it? If a house is worth 200,000, let's just pick a figure, then don't pay more than 200,000 for it. Now, the fantastic advantage you've got in the world of property, as opposed to stocks and shares, is you've got this whole group of people called surveyors. In the UK, they're called Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, also known as RICS. They will come out and they'll do a valuation, and they'll say, oh, you know, this property's worth 200,000. So you can commission a report to say how much the property's worth. Now I'm thinking about a property that we bought in June 2021. And we paid 142,500 for it. And it was one of these streets where all the houses are built the same. And the carbon copy mirror image of it, just directly across the street, in August the same year, sold for £200,000. The person that owned it had got a job in Australia. They'd had it for years and years and years. They bought it for £50,000. 15 years later, they get a job in Australia, don't sell this house because they're not sure if the job in Australia is going to work out or not. And then the job in Australia works out, and then they move to Australia permanently and they never come back. They're literally awake at night thinking, oh my God, what about insurance? What about if someone burgles it? It's not difficult to understand why somebody would give you a deal, because they just want the cash. And let's say you bought that house for 150, they've only got a mortgage of 10, they walk off clear and clean with 140,000. They reduce their costs for insurance, they reduce their costs for gardeners and maintenance and all that other stuff. And more importantly, they can sleep at night. Becoming a good property investor involves understanding, getting into the head of people that are more than willing to sell below market value, because that's a fantastic start point. You don't want to start your property investing career by buying a £200,000 house for 250, oops. You want to buy it for 150. Rule 4, stick to the business that you understand. Which company, especially in the States, has boomed more than anything else? Why have they all got crazy names that you can't pronounce easily? This one's called Nvidia. So the stock price was here, the share price was here, boom, like that. Buy Nvidia shares. Most people think they're buying some portion of artificial intelligence. Nvidia doesn't do artificial intelligence. Nvidia produces chips. This is my iPhone, all right? Standard iPhone, whatever it is, I've lost count, 14, I think, I don't know, 15, whatever it is. Just cast your mind back, those of you that can. Apple and iPhone, they're kind of pretty strong in the smartphone market. Which was the biggest phone manufacturer before iPhone? Because mobile phones were still huge before the iPhone. Biggest one? Nokia. Where is it now? You're going to love this. They're making car tires. Technology is a very, very fickle place to invest. So if you don't understand it, what are you doing investing in it? Do you know how to buy a property through a limited company? Because if you don't, you're going to get taken to the cleaners for tax. Careful. You're going to run it as service accommodation. You're going to have a C1 use class. What is C1? What's this new use class C5? What's that going to do to your capital allowances? Property, with regard to this rule, only invest in businesses that you understand, thank you Warren, is actually more dangerous than stocks and shares, because people think they understand it. You should invest in your education, you should get some qualifications, and you should make sure you understand it. Because some of the property strategies that used to work, think technology, think iPhone, think Nokia. For instance, 20 years ago, sale and rent back used to be a fantastic strategy. Not allowed anymore, it's illegal. Not only do you need to get yourself qualified and educated, you need to make sure that you're staying in touch so that when things change, so do you. Because you don't want to be reading about the changes in the paper. You want to be anticipating the changes so that you're not one of the ones that's caught out. Number 5, this is easily the most confusing if you don't know Warren. Here we go. Don't buy cigar butts. What are you on about now, Paul? Well, hey, don't come after me, this is Warren. You're looking for something that you can get for more or less free and you can make a little bit of money out of it. The example he uses is Eastman Kodak. What do? They produce films. So there used to be this mass market. You would go on holiday. You would take your treasured camera, which was probably quite expensive. You would then take some random pictures while you're on holiday with no way of knowing what the result was going to be. You take them off to your local chemist, Boots or wherever. You get them developed for another X amount of pounds. And then you get all the pictures back, and your 36 pictures that you took while you're on holiday, there's actually 2 of them that are any good, possibly. So what you'll see in the stock market is a series of shares, series of companies that have got great histories, but they're becoming obsolete. So the share price is tanking, going down really fast, but they're still making decent profits because they've got mass market appeal. So very often a share that was, £10 or $10, you can buy it for 50 cents or 50p. And people are like, oh, look at this. Last year it was £10, now it's 50p. What could possibly go wrong? Well, what could possibly go wrong is they go bankrupt. So you get one last puff out of it. You get one last dividend payment. The equivalent of that in property is you've got some property strategy and maybe you're flipping properties, but something's changed. The rules have changed and you haven't changed with it. So let's say your strategy is buying a £100,000 property, refurbishing it, and then selling it for £120,000. In the old days, that would work. Now, however, if you buy an investment property in Scotland, you've got to pay the normal stamp duty, which is whatever it is. In Scotland, it's called Land and Buildings Transaction Tax, which is a bit of a mouthful, so let's just call it stamp duty because it's the same thing. But now, if you buy a property in Scotland as an investor, you've got to pay 6%. That's a massive, straightforward tax on cost to whatever you're doing. So I'm not saying that you can't flip properties in Scotland. Of course you can. But you'd need to learn how to buy 6 at once, so they're on commercial stamp duty. Or you'd need to learn how to do assignable contracts. Or you'd need to learn techniques that cope with that extra cost. Be very careful that you don't get involved in a property strategy that used to work, that is now obsolete. So that was number 5. Don't buy cigar butts. What is number 6? Be greedy when others are fearful, and be fearful when others are greedy. When people start panicking with cryptocurrency, the price per Bitcoin, they sell it, it goes down. When others are fearful, they sell their Bitcoin. That's when I buy. When the price is shooting up, I don't touch it. I've already got lots of Bitcoin. I'd love a lot more. But when it's rocketing up, I'll leave it to rocket up. So in the world of property, I think the best example I can give is when you're in a taxi. When the taxi driver says to you, isn't it great the way house prices are shooting up? When normal people are talking about you should buy property because house prices are shooting up or whatever, that's when you need to be careful. That's a bubble. 2007, 2008, if you remember the great financial crash, and house prices started coming down 10, 20% in some areas, that's when I bought shed loads. I bought millions of pounds worth of property. 2015, there was the Scottish independence referendum, and then it was Brexit. Brexit didn't get done until 2020, so you've got like a 6-year political uncertainty period of either Scotland's leaving the Union or Brexit's happening. And so everybody and their uncle, the newspapers, oh no, property prices are going to crash. So everybody was fearful. And then what happened in 2020? Well, you had COVID. And again, oh no, don't buy property, no one's going to work, no one will have any money, property prices are going to fall. So if you look back for the last 10 years, there's pretty much always been a reason why people are fearful. So I can completely understand if you haven't bought any properties for the last 10 years. But the average house price 10 years ago was 150,000. Now, it's 300,000. So in the last 10 years, for everybody's being fearful, property prices have doubled. Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. Okay, number 7. This is it. This is the big one. Seize the golden opportunities. This is where I start by saying Warren says that you need to make 7-8 decisions in your life to become a billionaire. If you know a stock or share is fundamentally undervalued and you've got a massive opportunity, go and do it. People that are really wealthy, they don't only do property or stocks and shares. They do property and stocks and shares and gold and maybe crypto. They've got a variety of strategies. But take the 23-year-old Paul. Had been working at Ford's in Essex. The factory that I was at shut. I had the option to take redundancy if that's what I wanted to do, and they would pay for a consultant to help me find another job. So think about you at the age of 23. Well, maybe you are 23, maybe you're 22. And somebody says, you can have 2 years' salary, tax-free, and we will help you find a better job. Would you at least look at it? That was a golden opportunity for me. But what did I do with that money? Because I took it. I bought a house up in Newcastle to go and live in, but that doesn't really count as an investment property because I was living there. But then I had 2 other pots of money. With one pot of money, I bought an investment property in Essex, and I bought a 4-bedroom detached house with some of my money and turned it into an HMO. But also, I ended up going to this company called Rowntrees, who don't exist anymore. Rowntree Macintosh. My job was chocolate production manager, so I was running, Mr. Willy Wonka over here. I was running a department that had 300 people in it, producing Toffee Crisp and Lion Bar. So you ever heard of Toffee Crisp or Lion Bar? Got nothing to do with money, but just give me some comments down below, because I was that guy. I made them for a long time. I arrive at the company as like a middle manager, and all anybody is talking about is the company's about to get taken over. Nestle bought us. I'm sure you've heard of Nestle. Now, you don't need to be a super genius to know that a takeover situation of a good, strong, profitable company like Rowntree's means a share price is going to go up. I put a lot of money. I put more than about £35,000 into Rowntree shares. And my Rowntree shares I bought for about £3.30 something per share. The company sold at a value equivalent to £11.50 a share. I tripled my money. So I took £33,000 and I turned it to £110,000 after tax. I knew this was a moment in time. I knew that the factory closing was an opportunity. And I did everything I possibly could to go get a better job so that I could take this redundancy money, so that I could buy a house in Newcastle, buy a house in Essex, and put a ton of money into the stock market. That was my golden opportunity. And here I am in Monaco. But if I hadn't taken it, where would I be? Most people did not take that opportunity. Even when I got to Rowntree's, everybody was talking about the takeover. But less than 10% of us put our money where our mouth was, and we actually bought Rowntree shares. There's Warren's 7 rules for wealth. Which one do you prefer? Do you disagree with any? Tell me in the chat box below. You are wonderful. I've been Paul. See you next week.